Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle. Hey, thanks for listening to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. Faith radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. Thanks for giving and for sharing with a friend.
Doing life together, reaching out with hope, encouraging one another, each step along the road. You and I can make everything a little better, doing life together.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Mintle, the relationship doctor, and I'm here along with my co-host, the other Dr. Mintle, my husband, Norm.
That's me.
It's you.
Yeah.
And every weekend, we, the two of us, are here, along with our producer, Katie, and we're doing life together. And we're so glad that you've joined us.
We are. And thanks for noticing that Katie's here. She's here in
Do
the
it without
studio.
her. She's the tech person who knows what she's doing over there.
I know. It's great.
Yeah.
I know. Okay, so we're going to talk about divorce today. And
Okay.
we know how prevalent it is. I mean, the numbers are staggering. They have been pretty consistent, I think. About half marriages fail for years. We also know that even when divorce happens, sometimes without drama or big, huge upset, it still affects the children in ways that we probably don't recognize.
That's right, Norm. So today we're going to talk about the sort of the fallout of divorce for the children and how that may affect them later in life. So we're really going to focus on adult children of divorce here. There are consequences that follow people into their adult lives, and we're going to recognize those, and we're going to give some hope for healing at the end of this as well.
And our intent today is not to blame anyone whose
right.
family has been through a divorce. You couldn't help it. We all have issues. But what we do want to do is help adult children of divorce, as you called them, and help them better understand how their parents' divorce may have affected them in terms of their current behavior.
Yeah, and that's the point of that is that if you have more awareness and you have some understanding as to why maybe you're struggling in the present because of some things that are being triggered or cued from the past. So again, we're not trying to put a guilt trip on anybody, but we're all broken in certain ways. We all are impacted by our past and what happens to us. And there are common traits that do emerge with adult children of divorce. And that's why we want to talk about it today. So our hope is that this show will make you feel like you have a little bit less stress because you kind of understand when you're facing stress, what's going on? What are you reacting to? And we know that being an adult child of divorce can impact your health and your mental health. And we certainly know that it can impact your relationships.
Right. And that's the obvious one. But we're going to be surprised as we go on with this program how many other effects there are. Mm-hmm. Now, again, we're not saying you're doomed. You can't change things, not at all. Rather, this is a good opportunity to learn, to heal, and grow. Once we see how something affects us, then we can do something about it.
That's right.
So let's begin with the big one. And in my mind, that's trust.
That is no surprise here, right? So trusting others is obviously going to be difficult when you see your parents split apart.
Right.
Trust is the cornerstone of all relationships. I think we did a show a few years back called Trust is a Must. Mm-hmm. Remember that one? Mm-hmm. And when trust is broken, it is hard to repair. Now, it can be repaired, but it is a little bit difficult. But divorce jeopardizes your ability to trust. And when you can't trust the two most important people in your life to get along and to try to work things out, it's very unsettling.
So what you're saying is when you basically lose trust in your parents, that could be a setup for you in the future not to trust anyone.
That's right. Watching your parents' relationship norm erode, it does leave you feeling vulnerable to trusting other people. Sure. You might think, if I open myself up to this new person, will I be hurt? Will the same thing happen to me? You also might be second-guessing your own existing relationship and wondering do we really have honesty here? Is there really commitment? Is there something I'm missing that I didn't see? Maybe that's part of what you thought happened with your own parents.
And it has to be especially hard when children don't see the divorce coming.
Yeah.
They don't know what's brewing between their parents. Mm-hmm. And then they don't even understand why their parents can't or won't try to work things out. I would think these trust issues could also be grounded and result in a fear of abandonment because it's kind of like my parents left me, my family dissolved.
Yeah. Yeah, and fear of abandonment can be a deep-seated fear for any adult child of divorce. When they commit to a relationship, abandonment might be in the back of their mind. They might, if you're an adult child of divorce, you might be thinking, "Oh, I'm committing here, but will this person, will this relationship end? Will this person end up leaving me? Or will there be things I didn't see?" And when your parents divorce, we know from talking to people who have been through divorces that life is never the same, and there is that sense of abandonment. And I think I liked what you said about, the child doesn't always make sense of this. They don't really know, why did they leave?
Right.
Like, what's going on? Why did my mom or dad, why did they have to leave home? And as adults, that fear of abandonment that you felt as a child because a lesson becomes some kind of a lesson that maybe, love stops. At some point, love is going to stop, or that conflict leads to permanent separation.
I'm sure they try to make sense of it. And children, depending on the age, I suppose, have all sorts of crazy theories in their head about what happened.
Yeah.
My world just imploded. What happened?
Well, and in conflict especially, they see conflict and they're like, why don't they work things out?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And unconsciously, this fear of abandonment may even lead you to sabotage your own current relationships, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah.
You don't even realize you're doing it, is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, and here's something else that I see. When parents divorce and they move on with their lives, the children struggle that their home split apart.
Right.
They don't want to move on and pretend half of their family doesn't exist. It's a very, very different perspective from the child's point of view. It's a loss, not some new beginning that maybe the parents are talking about and feeling. That is not a new beginning in a way that a child wanted.
Right.
A beginning.
And from what you've told me, the children never see the world the same way as children of intact families.
That's right. Right.
They have lost that sense of real home, and potentially now they must navigate two different families if both parents remarry.
Yeah, and what's hard is that the children have to think about things like, which of my parents gets to see this first? Or which of my parents is going to want to hear my good news maybe first? And will I hurt the other parent's feelings? Will I side with one of them? I can't really do that. But what if I feel like, one of them is more right in a situation? I just think it's a lot for a child to navigate.
Well, and you see so much in media where one parent tries to pull the kid away from the other parent and say how bad that one was.
Yeah, you really don't want to do that. You really want to try to stay neutral as the parent on that. But no matter what you do, I think children often feel responsible for their parents' emotions. Even when parents work hard to be civil in the divorce, they're listening to each other, they're making plans, and the child is wondering, okay, wait, why couldn't they do this when they were married?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Now
they're
they're
so
being
cooperative.
civil. Yeah,
Right,
and cooperative.
Right. That makes sense. One of the research projects that we looked at said that there was one overriding impression that was gained from studying children divorce, and that was a sense of lifelong grief, meaning that divorce is never over for the child. I thought that was really profound.
Yeah, and here's how one person put it. A parent may be able to start over with a new spouse, but for the child, their world is forever split. There is no starting over. Things are complicated and fractured. It's not a one-time event, but an ever-widening gap with constant change. So that's a lot of what we were saying before, but that's really been confirmed by some of the
And when we say
children.
the word, we use the word fallout, it's really more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
ongoing
it's just-
consequences. Yeah.
It's this chronic thing. And the way a child interprets this breakup, as we mentioned earlier, often leads to self-blame. How many times have we heard children say, well, it must have been my fault. I didn't do what Daddy asked, or Mom wanted this and I didn't do it, even though, of course, it's not their fault.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to they're not making sense of this.
Right.
They don't know what else to do because their brains aren't fully developed. The younger they are, they may not even have any real good abstract reasoning. So what they end up doing is just questioning, it must be me, I must be bad, I must have done something, and they just think, oh, something's wrong. My parents didn't love me enough
Right.
to stay with me.
Right, which is really sad because that's usually not the case. In fact, in the media and movies and TV, we always say, Daddy and I love you so very, very much, but we don't like each other very much, or something like that. But how confusing is that?
Yeah, it's confusing to a kid. I think one of the things is that they really don't get a good role model for conflict.
The parents.
The parents aren't giving the child a good role model. So
Oh,
the
yeah.
child's not getting a good role model from the parents, watching all this contention and tension and stress and anxiety. And they see maybe heated arguments, maybe they hear yelling or fighting. So the work is really how to learn to deal with conflict and then find some other good role models. One of the things I used to do, Norm, was I would encourage adult children of divorce to find a couple who handles divorce well and then try to model their relationship after that couple.
Oh, that's a great idea. It seems to me, too, that all these things that we've talked about can lead to this massive hesitancy about intimacy. I mean, if trust was broken as a child and you felt abandoned and you saw fighting and a lack of reconciliation, you have to be left with a high degree of hesitancy to commit to anyone.
Yeah, because you're again thinking, this person could leave me.
Right.
So you guard your heart, which means you can't really fully commit to another person because if you get close to them, there's that possibility of leaving. So closeness and intimacy can be very, very challenging.
One extreme can be not getting involved intimately at all, I would think. Or the other extreme, maybe overanalyzing every relationship you have.
Yeah, because you're more sensitive to the problems when you first experience them with your original family. It's like you have extra sensitive radar for problems and tension, and this can lead to overthinking, anticipating problems.
Right. And everything we're talking about leads to a massive negative outlook on life and relationships, I think.
Which you have to be careful about that because you're not your parents, even though you've been influenced by them. That's a truth we want to really make sense of because this is sounding like such bad news so far,
Right,
isn't it?
right.
We're talking about all these consequences that we hear. But there is going to be good news and hope as we get going in this.
And the truth is, you are not your parents.
That's right.
Yeah, good. Okay, I have a question for you. I've heard that adult children of divorce can have a type of someone they look for in a partner. Is that true?
Well, sometimes we see a person attracted to someone who loves to take care of other people. This is a comforting trait because it feels like the adult child of divorce will be nurtured and the person won't leave. But then the opposite can be true as well. They might find someone who's highly dependent on them, meaning they'll stay in the relationship no matter what. So I don't think these are conscious things. They're just things that you get attracted to patterns that are familiar to you, but they might not be conscious patterns.
So we've talked about all these negative fallout type things, but there are also strengths that we can see developing and healing that comes to you when you intentionally deal with the issues. And we're going to do that right after this break. Stay tuned.
Good news coming. Are you a mom or a dad trying to do your best to raise a healthy weight child in an unhealthy eating culture? Do you often struggle with how to respond when your child asks if she is fat or if he needs to lose weight? Do you wonder what is normal and how do I best impact my child and his or her eating habits? Well, hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle, and my book, Raising Healthy Kids in an Unhealthy World, teaches parents how to raise healthy kids in an overscheduled, fast food, video game world by making simple choices, easy changes, and instilling good habits that will improve everyone's life today and forever. Winner of the Mom's Choice Award, Raising Healthy Kids in an Unhealthy World will give you this confidence, the confidence you need to take charge of your child's eating and raise a healthy weight child.
Raising Healthy Kids in an Unhealthy World. Available on Dr. Linda's website, drlindamintle.com, and available online where books are sold.
Welcome back. This is the Dr. Linda Mintle Show, and we're glad you're with us. I love to remind folks that you can follow Dr. Linda on her social media, X and Instagram, at Dr. Linda Mintle, and on Facebook, Dr. Linda Mintle, author and speaker. And by the way, this is also a podcast, and you can listen to it anytime, anywhere you want to on any of your favorite podcast platforms.
Or My Faith Radio.
Or myfaithradio.com.
That's right.
All right, so we've spent a lot of time talking about the fallout of divorce on children, but on the bright side, which we said we were going to talk about, there are a few areas that can be strengthened from this difficult experience, right?
Yeah. One of them is finances.
Finances?
Yeah. A divorce usually results in somebody being much more attentive to their finances and careful with their spending because they had to be. So suddenly if you lose the income of somebody, you have to be more attentive to what's going on. So early financial difficulties, might lead to better financial management later in life because you've had to deal with that from a younger age.
I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
But I did think about this one. What about people could be more independent? Is that possible?
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful with this one, though, not to overemphasize independence, because remember, we just talked about intimacy problems. So if you think, oh, I'm going to be really independent, and it's based on so that I don't have to,
I don't have to deal with
yeah, if
all these
somebody
issues,
leaves me,
right?
that's the wrong motive. But going through a divorce as a child does help you build independence. You have to do a lot more things for yourself, and you're pushed into more self-management, and that can be a growth trait.
And I suppose then what we're saying is that for the adult child who watched maybe the parent he or she lived with have to do that,
Yeah.
that was really formative for
Yeah,
them.
and it would be a good role model, right? If
Right.
you have to be more independent and do things on your own and, try to watch your money and manage your life a little bit better.
Another one I thought of is empathy. If you see the pain that your parents are going through, maybe you have more sympathy or empathy for them, especially because of the position you were placed in as a child. We tend to build empathy as we go through difficult situations in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, and I think that can be a positive trait. Now, on the negative side of that, it could be that I'm just not going to feel anything, and I'm not going to go there. But I think when people, anytime you're in a difficult situation, you build that empathy for other people that are going through something similar to you because you know what it feels like.
Right.
So again, I think it can do that. It can build empathy in people, and that can be a good thing that comes out of this.
Well, we've done programs on empathy and talked about it a lot, but one of the things that sticks out in my memory is that it's really an awareness of the emotional needs of other people that you're sensitive to.
Yeah, and when we talked about how many people you're going to encounter in your daily life that have gone through divorce in their family, you can relate to that and you can have some empathy for people. I know what that feels like when I was a child. I knew what it felt like. Yeah, so I think that can be a positive.
Okay, so let's get into the wonderful topic of healing from all this. How do we begin? Where do we start?
Well, it's a lot like everything we talk about, Norm, where you have to start with acknowledging and identifying your feelings about your parents. Now, I don't mean blaming them. I just mean looking at it realistically and say, okay, this is what happened in my family. Where am I in this process? Have we talked about any of these areas? Have I ever thought about trust or fear of abandonment? Have I thought about how they deal with conflict and how that's going to affect my conflict styles? Do I need some healing in those areas? I think if you just start by asking the questions
Of yourself.
yeah, about the things that we've been talking about and be very specific and think, how did this impact me? And if you have siblings, this could be a really good conversation to have with your siblings. Are we being impacted by this? Do you guys have trust issues?
Right.
Do you guys sometimes wonder about this? That would be a great place to start.
I love that with the siblings. Another good place is the church. Church family should definitely play a role when it can, when it's healthy, and you know people who you can trust. Years ago, you ran a group for adult children of divorce at a Christian school.
I did because there was such a need there. I mean, there were so many people that were struggling with this. They had no place to talk to each other. They sort of asked me as one of the moms in the rooms, and I thought, well, you know what? People need a safe place to talk. They need a place to cry, to be angry, or whatever they were going through at the time, because of what was going on with the divorce, and they need a place to begin to heal. And we were able to pray for each other in that group. And I got to tell you, Norm, that prayer time was the part that was so powerful in that group.
And that's where the church should shine.
Right, I
That's
agree.
where we, the members of the body of Christ, should rise to the occasion
Yeah,
and
agree.
care. Yeah. Another option is to find a Christian therapist and address these issues. I know you wrote a book on conflict. We call it We Need to Talk, which could be very helpful because managing conflict is important in any healthy relationship.
Yeah, and it's always so interesting to me that people never, well, I shouldn't say never. It rarely do people think, oh, I watched that conflict style. I took that on, or I'm very similar to my parents. But the moment that I point that out, they're like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what they were like. And that's exactly what they did. And I'm kind of repeating that pattern. So a therapist can really help you learn more about those patterns. They can help you with commitment and trust and how to build those two pillars, commitment and trust, in a relationship regardless of what has happened to you in your past.
That's good. So our message today for you folks is just because your parents' relationship didn't work doesn't mean yours is going to fail. especially if you become aware of the consequences and the problems that may have followed you. But you now must become very intentional and begin to work on them and find healing.
Yeah, so I like what we're saying here. We're saying that be aware. Like don't try to just say, okay, that divorce was then, it's over, it's not having any impact on me. Just
And
be
this is
aware.
just who I am.
Yeah, be aware of what has happened. And we're talking about a time of self-introspection where you really think about this and you say, okay, I've got to work on myself. I've got to look at these things. And especially when you're going into your next relationship, if that's something that follows after. Because if you don't work on your part in that divorce, you're just going to carry that into your next relationship.
Right.
And then it's going to repeat.
What are the statistics about children of divorce who also get divorced?
Yeah, it's not good with the second relationship, you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It's I don't know exactly the statistics, but the difference to me is if somebody comes in and says, okay, I'm going to really identify what went wrong and I'm going to spend time on it and work on it, and then they don't repeat those patterns, those relationships have a way better opportunity to do well.
Sure.
But if they don't and they just move, they're upset, they're rejected, they don't like the way things ended, and then they find somebody else, they usually just bring in those same patterns because it's never one-sided. There's always, I mean, there can be,
Sure.
extenuating circumstances like abuse and substance use and things like that. But I'm talking about when people just can't get along and they're in a lot of conflict.
Right. And that whole we've grown apart.
Yeah. But I want to talk about in the last few minutes here, Norm, about the biggest form of healing that comes from the Lord, because you need to grieve the lost, but you also need to do that with God, and you need to do what the Bible says: take your burdens to Him. So bring all your issues and bring them right to Him, lay them right at the foot of the cross. But that means, again, facing how you've been hurt and how you've been wounded, and then being willing to give that to the Lord.
Right. That's good because we can trust Him.
Right.
We can trust God.
Right.
And He's a Father who never leaves, never abandons, all of the things that we talked about in the first part of our program. But it seems to me, too, that as we do this, a huge part of the biblical message to us is forgiveness.
It is. And it may take time to work that through, but at some point, you have to forgive and to move forward. It is essential as part of the healing.
Well, we know the Bible is very clear about the power of forgiveness and what happens when we don't. But it seems, too, that understanding and trusting God's love, His unconditional love for us, is critical for our healing to begin. It's very corrective of what happened to us in life.
Yeah, that's right. The Bible is really a testimony to God's faithfulness and His promises to those who trust in Him. So you're having trouble trusting other people, put your trust in the one who never leaves, as you said, Norm, who never forsakes you. He's always with you. You don't need to carry that burden of your parents' divorce any longer. Just lay it down.
And I've heard you use the word reframe in the past sometimes, but it's kind of looking at things in a different way. Sometimes I think we have to look at ourselves in a different way and see ourselves the way God sees us. He loves us so much that He gave His life for us, and He's committed for us, and Jesus prays for us to the Father. We have to see what God says about us. There are hundreds of them. You wrote a list one time many years ago that I kept in my Bible, how God sees us and who we are in Him. That way we can trust.
Yeah, and when you start to think about the characteristics of God, He never changes.
Right.
He can't violate His promises, so He's not going to let you down or disappoint you. Right. So God is the healer of the brokenhearted. He restores faith to the disenchanted. He loves unconditionally. You can trust somebody who loves you perfectly, right? And that's God, the only one who can probably love you perfectly. So approach God with your fears, your hurts, your anxieties, and allow His healing power to work in you. Fight the discouragement and the doubt and deflect those arrows of abandonment and fear using the shield of faith. That's what part of the armor of God that we learned probably when you were younger. You're not a casualty of a family. I know they might have been at war, but you're not a casualty of war. You're not a victim of your past, rather a victor with a protector who holds you securely. So rely on God, stand firm in your faith, and put your hope in Christ, the solid ground to rebuild your life. That's all the time we have for today. Many thanks to our producer and my co-host Norm Mintle, who makes this show a conversation, and to our technical producer Katie Sims Wilson. From all of us here at Faith Radio, hey, we'll talk to you again next weekend. In the meantime, remember, we're doing life together, and it's better when you don't have to do it alone.
Doing life together.
Hey, thanks for listening to this conversation from the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. These conversations are available because of your support. Become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and share it with friends so we can live life to the fullest, walk confidently, and find healing and hope.